So today we are going to talk about what caused the Great Depression. It was a horrible economic disaster that happened in our country during the decade of the 1930s. So again, it's going to be a very different topic than what we just learned about in the 1920s. We talked about all the craziness and upbeat attitude, the Roaring Twenties, as they were called. And yeah, there was some negative aspects of the 1920s that we talked about as well. But overall, the feel in the country was very positive. Businesses seemed to be doing well. People were making money. People were spending money. But that is where things underneath the surface kind of were going wrong. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is what caused this to happen in our country. So these are just super short notes about the causes of the Great Depression. So the first cause is something called overproduction. Manufacturers or factories were producing way more goods than Americans could afford to buy. The shelves were stockpiled with factory-made goods, and they weren't being sold because Americans didn't need them or couldn't afford to buy them. And so they just sat on the shelf. Farmers were doing the same thing. They were growing too much. And so they had all of these extra items. And when that happens, they have to lower their prices really, really cheap to try to sell them, or they just go to waste. And it hurts both the businesses and it hurts the farmers as well. So that's the first cause. The second cause had to do with our banking system. Back then, banks were not overseen or regulated yet by the government, and they didn't have any rules to follow. So each bank kind of did their own thing. And they were making poor investment judgments with people's money. When you put your money in the bank, it doesn't just sit in a safe somewhere and that's it. Banks are a business and they need to make money as well. So what they do is they make investment decisions with your money and try to make more money for themselves, but also for you. But back then, since there were no rules or laws, a lot of times they were making poor investment decisions and judgments with the money, and it didn't go well. So that's the next cause. Finally, the next cause, the third cause, is consumer credit. This is on the American people. People were, in the 1920s, were buying a lot of stuff in the 1920s. Buying too much. And they started to use credit cards or loans to buy things. And they were buying way more than they could afford. And when that bill came in and they were not able to repay their loans to the banks, that hurts the banks and it causes the banks to fail because they're not paying back that money that the bank loaned them. So all of these things were getting out of control and occurring during the 1920s, and people just didn't realize what was happening. The next was on the stock market. Again, when we talked about stocks at the beginning of the year, we talk about when you buy stock, it's like buying a small piece of that company. And you can earn money if that company does well, or you could lose money if that company doesn't do so well. And it's a guessing game. You never know if a company is going to have a good showing in business or if it's not going to do so well. So during the 1920s, they were doing what was called stock market speculation. Speculation is hoping your stock does well. Again, it's guessing. When stocks rose in price in the 1920s, people were buying stocks on margin. When you buy stocks on margin, that is buying stocks on credit. So they were taking out loans to buy stock, and they were hoping or speculating that it did well. But unfortunately, when it didn't, they were unable to repay those loans back. And again, that just hurts the companies and it hurts the banks. And so that, again, was another cause that led up to this particular day. Black Tuesday is October 29th, 1929. And this is when stock prices dropped in value drastically. Banks were closing and people were losing their savings and they couldn't get their money out of the bank because the banks failed because people were not repaying back their loans. Companies and businesses failed and closed, and of course, people were losing their jobs. Farmers lost money on low crop prices. So this is the event that kind of leads us into the Great Depression. But again, it's not what caused the Great Depression. What caused it was the overproduction by the factories and the farmers, the bad banking practices, the use of credit and credit cards by the American people, and then again, buying stocks on credit as well. Those are what caused this to happen. And this is the date when everything kind of fell apart, which is October 29th, 1929. 1/4 of the entire US population was unemployed as a result of the crash. So again, 25% of Americans did not have a job following the stock market crash and during the Great Depression. Every class was affected by this. Upper, middle, and lower class were all affected by the Great Depression. It didn't just hit one or the other. The upper class was affected because usually they were the business owners or business managers. And when their companies failed, they closed, and so they were affected. The middle class were the workers, and the lower class were also the workers that were in these businesses. And again, when they lost their jobs, again, all of them were affected by the Great Depression. In the stock market, there's two different types of markets. First is the bear market, and that's when stock prices keep going down. A bear market is not good. A bear market is scary, like a bear, just like that picture. And this actually happened about a week or two ago when the coronavirus was causing a lot of businesses to close up because they couldn't stay open during this. And that's not good. It's not a good market. However, the opposite of that is what's called a bull market. A bull market is when stock prices keep going up. It's a strong economy. It's when businesses are doing well and making money. And that's what people want to see. So hopefully soon we will rebound from this. And back in the 1930s, they will get out of it. The only thing that really gets us out of the Great Depression back then will be another significant event, and that will be World War II. And that will be the only thing that helps us rebound from the Great Depression. So those are your short notes. Over the next few days, we'll talk about how the American people lived through this, how they were affected by it, their families, and their lives. And that's what we'll be talking about over the next week or so. Hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you soon.